I was not expecting this at all. So I was just about to go. I was running my stuff in the background. I was just about to go live, and then all of a sudden, Blizzard announced this. Like, this isn't even a... This is completely out of the blue. Like, legitimately out of the blue. I was not expecting this in the slightest. Let me just quickly get some decent light. There we go. Okay. So, cross-faction instances. Cross-faction instances. So, what they go on to say, and this really has come out of the blue. They go on to say is, for years now, many players have questioned whether the rules restricting communication and cooperation between Alliance and Horde need to be so absolute. The faction divide could keep close friends from playing together, or cause players to feel that their faction leaves them with far fewer opportunities to pursue their favourite group content. But these downsides have long been justified in order to preserve a central element of the Warcraft universe. It all began with a game titled Warcraft: Orcs and Humans, right? But, to quote a one-time war chief of the Horde, times change. Which, what a fucking perfect way to open this. Holy shit. So, they go on to say, I am pleased to announce that we're working on adding the ability for Alliance and Horde players to form pre-made parties together for dungeons, raids, and rated PvP. There have been 2 decades worth of code and content crafted with the assumption that parties can only have players of a single faction, and while we want to make this feature available as soon as possible, the extent of the change means that it couldn't be ready in time for the upcoming Eternity's End content update. I bet you that's why we haven't had the release date for Eternity's End, because they wanted to push this as hard as they possibly could. That's the reason why we haven't got it, and I can almost guarantee it. Because they've been trying to figure out if they could push it for Eternity's End, because that would be massive for them. Instead, we are planning to test and release it as part of a subsequent 9.2.5 update. We're eager to hear your feedback about the details we're sharing today, and on the details of our implementation when this feature becomes available to the public test realm following the release of Eternity's End. In crafting the rule set for this new feature, we were guided by 2 goals. Patch 9.3, make Lovecraft not Warcraft confirmed. More tentacles in the Older Gods incoming. Plot written by Stephen King. I'd watch it serious. I'd watch it, absolutely. I'd be happy with that. So, in crafting the rule set for this new feature, we were guided by 2 goals. Focus on organised instance gameplay. Dungeons, raids, and rated PvP have been at the centre of the most compelling arguments for relaxing the faction divide. This is content that by definition requires a pre-made group, and thus social barriers will have the greatest negative impact on people's ability to access these experiences on their preferred terms. Makes perfect sense. That is exactly what the instance gameplay experience should be, and anytime you have something there that stops players from being able to do that, it becomes a little bit rough. Make this an opt-in feature as much as possible. In terms of in-world fiction and player preferences, there are decades of animosity to overcome. While we are excited to offer players the choice to reach across the faction divide and cooperate to overcome common foes, we know that there are many who will react warily to this change, and we don't want to override those preferences. This is about increasing options for players. Yes, that is the key thing for anything you do, Blizzard. That is one of the key things that you do, increasing options for players. The more options we have as players, the better it is. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that more systems you throw at us, that's an entirely different conversation, but the more options we have to experience a system, the better it is across the board. These guidelines led us to the following system. Players will be able to directly invite members of the opposite faction to a party if you have a battle tag or real ID friendship, or if you are members of a cross-faction WoW community. Pre-made groups in the group finder listings for Mythic Dungeons, raids, or rated arena/RBGs will be open to applicants of both factions, though the group leader may choose to restrict the listing to same faction applicants if they so choose. Guilds will remain single faction, and random match-made activities like heroic dungeons, skirmishes, or random battlegrounds will all remain same faction, both because there is less faction-driven pressure around random groups, and to avoid compromising the opt-in nature of the feature by randomly placing a queuing orc in a group with a night elf. Again, perfect. That is the perfect way to do this. This doesn't mean that this is how the system will always be, but this is a perfect way for you to introduce it. Once in a party together, members of the opposite faction will remain unfriendly while in the outdoor world, and fully hostile in war mode, as they do today. though they will be able to communicate through party chat. Upon entering a dungeon, raid, or rated PvP match, however, all members will be friendly and able to assist each other in combat, trade loot, earn shared achievements, and otherwise fully cooperate the same way members of the same faction have always been able to. A major goal in announcing this feature in advance is to make sure we're capturing all the expectations and requirements for this to be a smooth experience. A group raiding, doing Mythic Plus keys, or chasing higher PvP ratings should be able to operate seamlessly whether they're a same faction or cross-faction group. This functionality will also apply to legacy instances and is available at all levels, though there will be several older instances that cross-faction parties cannot enter, at least for now. Battle of Dazar'alor, Trial of the Crusader, Icecrown Citadel, and a handful of others that similarly have extensive faction-specific components that will have to be reworked to support cross-faction parties. The fact that they've gone cross-faction and they've identified this as something that they can't currently do, whether or not that's because the way that it identifies the group, it kind of temporarily puts you onto, if you're Alliance, temporarily flags you as Horde and vice versa. I kind of understand that, and honestly, the fact that they are turning around and saying, look, again, a perfect point that their communication has been so good recently is they're not just going, this is what we're doing, it's this is what's happening, these are our thoughts, these are our plans, this is what it could look like in the future, these are our intentions, and they're giving us information straight away as to not disappoint us. Again, perfect. And I love the fact that they have said, at least for now, they're actively working on finding a way around that.
Oh my goodness!
Hey Kex, my man, look like the game is moving towards no realm and no faction division. It's good for long term in the game, but sadly we'll lose the magic that it used to have. I would disagree with that to a certain extent. I feel as though the faction divide was good at the start, but it's now not needed anymore. I think there will be faction division, it just won't be as harsh as it is now. You can still be Horde and you can still have Horde-centric stuff, but it is going to be, you know, it is going to be one of those things that I think is good. And no realm, I think they'll still keep realms as well. I think they'll still keep realms. There are those likely who have read this far with some unease. So I'll read that again. There are likely those who have read this far with some unease, worried that this is a chipping away at a foundational principle of Warcraft. At BlizzCon 2019, when an attendee asked about cross-faction play, we responded at the time with, Alliance and Horde separation is a pillar of what makes Warcraft, Warcraft. But upon reflection, that's an oversimplification. Alliance and Horde identity is what is fundamental to Warcraft. And while at times that identity has been one of division and open conflict, we've seen Alliance and Horde finding common ground and working together ever since Warcraft 3. Notably including the last time a Warcraft chapter was named Eternity's End. And the instances of cooperation in World of Warcraft itself are too numerous to count. We're hopeful that these changes will serve to actually strengthen faction identity by allowing more players to play the faction whose values, aesthetic and characters they find more compelling, rather than feeling forced to choose between their personal preference and the ability to play with friends. Following the events of Battle of Pharazaroth, the Alliance and Horde are poised in an uneasy armistice. The factions still stand apart, and even as some of their leaders cooperate in the Shadowlands, countless members of each faction will neither forgive nor forget the wartime actions of the other. For every Jaina, there is a Gen, and that seems unlikely to change anytime soon. But why shouldn't players be able to make that choice for themselves, especially in a cooperative setting where the story revolves around coming together to overcome dire threats? We look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback on this feature both now and once it arrives for testing on the 9.2.5 PTR. We'll see you in Azeroth. Holy shit, the Mad Lads did it. They've actually done it. Yes, we know they've worked together since Warcraft 3. Why did it take them to Shadowlands to reflect this? I think, honestly, I honestly believe it's probably a lot of the changes that we've seen over the past however long. You think back to people like Metzen, Mike Morhaime, you know, the old guard of Blizzard going. I think this is part of that. There's a lot of changes that they've made in Shadowlands and everything that's come over the past year. Not specifically just for Shadowlands systems, but like to the game as a whole. And I honestly think it's because the old guard are no longer there. I mean, you take a look at Metzen's speeches at BlizzCon. He made a very particular point of making it about Horde versus Alliance. He made a very, very particular point of that. So that to me is why we're seeing this change now. This is a great change in my. This is a change that is only healthy for the game. I see no downsides to this. You can opt into this if you want. You don't have to do this. I see zero downsides to this. This is possibly the greatest thing that they've announced for I don't know how long. Shifting from you think you do but you don't to, oh, you've asked for this since, like, Wrath? Okay, let's see. Well, yeah, exactly. But again, I think part of that is because of the change that we have seen in the, you know, in the developers, the change that we've seen in the teams that they have available to them. And not only that, I think that they have, not to worry, we have 9.2 release date, and Wednesday we get a new expansion reveal. I wouldn't be surprised, Devil. I would not be surprised. That would make sense to me. And like I said, I think the only reason we haven't had a 9.2 release date yet is because, as they mention up here, they say it couldn't be ready in time for the upcoming Eternity's End content update. I think the reason why it took so long for them to announce 9.2 is because of that. The fact that they wanted to make it available as soon as possible, and they were testing to see if they could get it in for 9.2. It's not. It's going to be available for 9.2.5. I am so happy with this change. I am so happy with this change. This is only healthy for the game. I honestly cannot see how you could have a negative take on this. And the only reason you could have a negative take on this is one of two things. Either number one is that you are so blindly set on, oh, my faction, says the guy with a Horde tattoo. You're so focused on your faction that you can't see past that and how good it is for the game. Or number two is you don't actually care for Warcraft, you just want to talk shit about it. Those are the only reasons you could have a problem for this. Because as they said down here, and this is a very key point as well, they say, you know, in BlizzCon 2019, Alliance and Horde separation is a pillar of what makes Warcraft Warcraft. But upon reflection, that's an oversimplification. Alliance and Horde identity is what's fundamental to Warcraft. And that is a perfect way of describing it. I am so happy with this. I cannot tell you how happy I am with this. This is the best thing that they've done in Warcraft for probably close to a decade.